And the festival is a music and arts festival just centered around social change. Okay. So we book artists who are advocating for some sort of social or political change.
Where is the festival?
It's in Gainesville.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so last year our headliner was Talib Kweli.
Yes,
so that was a really great year. Before that we had Charles Bradley,
cool.
who recently passed away. And was, one of the groups that I sub in for, they're doing a cover set for him actually, I think next weekend in Gainesville. But
yeah, man, I was listening to I'm Going Through Changes. It's such a beautiful, I mean, I have to give a shout out to Erica Falls, who's been singing with Galactic. And Erica, I was on this jam cruise a couple of years ago. And Erica is a phenomenal vocalist, but she's also like a real R&B scholar. Like she's really into the history of R&B.
Yeah.
And she was like, there's a guy on this boat, Charles Bradley, you gotta check him out. He's like an old dude, but he's just getting into the mix. And I saw his show, and it was fantastic. It was fantastic, man. He's like the old school James Brown, Joe Tex, Jackie Wilson. He was cut from that cloth, and the Dap Tones, they really did their thing with that, So.
Yeah, he was an incredible performer. I mean, I think Screeching Eagle was the soul name, right? And he would come out and they would do the whole thing where he'd have the big Pharaoh's gown and they did the transitions in the show. He did a couple James Brown covers and I missed that guy already. Hey there.
Hey.
How you doing? So I heard this was in production for close to 3 years. Is that true? So what's it like reworking these songs live or just finally getting them out to people every night?
It's great to see the people's reaction to the music and people taking it on. Like when we do the song "Come On," and people are singing along with the chorus. We've been involved with it for, quite a while. So it's great to see people have taken the music on, and it's a weird thing for us because this is one of these records that was really done in the studio.
Yeah.
Our records before, we'd have a song and then we'd play it in front of people and what have you. And this record really was written and played in the studio and went through various incarnations of songs. And so it's like to play something like Program. We played it for maybe 4 or 5 times. With Patterns in Time, we played it maybe 3 times. So it's a journey for us as well as for the audience.
You think that's more comfortable?
This record's
Shade is a concept piece, and we want to make sure the songs fit Shade. Not just that it's a good idea to play this song, we like playing this track. We want to definitely add something to the process, because we look at Shade as a certain kind of a spiritual product that has a lot of different, many lives in it, many stories to tell. And Corey's talking about Who's That and Invisible, and these kind of things are all stories within even the context of the title of Shade. So that's the thing that we want to respect and give the most energy put towards is just the title and the concept.
I think it's a challenge. I mean, it's a different process for us. So we're used to having a song and beating it up, and then making the changes and then recording it. I mean, that's what we did in our history. So it's weird to have a song where you recorded it, and then it's like, what's that part? What is the what? And having to wrap our minds around it, our collective minds around it. But it's a little different project.
And on this record, there's a lot of throwbacks and covers of Marvin Gaye, Biggie, and like we were talking about earlier, Robert Johnson. So what drew you guys to want to rework some of these classics?
It's a combination of things. The Biggie track is something Corey used to sort of rap to at Soundcheck, not to mention there's a Brooklyn connection with Biggie. Really a connection with living color and hip-hop in general, but that's sort of how that connection began. The Robert Johnson came out of us doing the 100th anniversary of Robert Johnson show at the Apollo, and we played the song live, and there's a certain kind of a reaction. It created a certain kind of an impetus for us to sort of look at the blues and looking at this record a certain way, and it actually became a track that was on the record. We started playing it live in our own show.
Right.
So there were different things. You know, with Live in Color, we're always kind of like in a search mode. Not purposeful all the time. Sometimes some things happen out of habit, some things happen out of us just being experimental. And depending on the time period, that experiment might become the right thing for the right time. We didn't plan for things to happen that way. The Marvin Gaye piece came a little bit last, but it happened during this kind of like bananas election and things that have been happening in New York City with police officers and well, in America generally, with so many killings of African American youth, etc. So we don't, you know, some of the ideas come out of just us experiencing things or things that happen that influence us to want to write or say something. It's not really a planned kind of a thing. So the album process was still in fruition. So those pieces were added to the mix, and kind of paraphrasing from what Vernon said, we just kind of tried the idea out.
Violence and things like that.
Well, that's just the point. There's so many things in those three songs that you mentioned, the three covers that you mentioned, that sort of talk about immutable sort of ideas. The idea of feeling very low has not changed over the last millennia. It's not changing, and nothing's being really done about it. The points that something like Inner City Blues was talking about is relevant today as it was 55 years ago when it was first recorded. To think that that Biggie track is 25 years old. You know, it's deep that all these things have how old they are and how relevant they still are. That's the power of really saying people saying that they're committed to change. But are you really committed to change? Because as far as I can see, you're not committed to really anything. You're committed to maintaining, but not really changing. And I think the lesson in those three songs is that's the blues. That's what the blues is. From its traditional application from Robert Johnson to its more modern sort of musings from Marvin Gaye to what really is going on in the world right now with Biggie. So the lament of that is really what the blues is about. And that's sort of like, to a certain degree, that is sort of the linchpin to all the songs on there. It's like the blues is about life. The blues is about what's going on in your life, externally and internally. And all the songs on this record sort of do that. Especially
While driving here to this interview, by probably 5 or 6 different billboards that were all, you know, advertisements for gun ranges and going and firing automatic weapons, and they were all strangely sexualized. I don't know if that's something that you guys...
a hot girl holding a gun?
Yes, it's always a woman holding some sort of assault rifle, and I don't know if that's something that have you seen a lot of that attitude in advertising in your time in Florida?
Well, sex and violence is American as apple pie. It's the thing about it is a weird combination of sex, violence, and religiosity. And I mean religiosity in terms of doctrinal, about spirituality. Like people have said, the most segregated day is Sunday. I mean, Christian beliefs did not stop any of the things that happened in slavery. And so those things, all those attitudes, we live, interestingly enough, as violent as these times are, we live in a much less violent time. And, you know, I could talk about having been a boy in the 70s and in the 80s, crazy. But at the same time, in the proliferation of guns and the proliferation of rage is, it's a powder keg always. And you add that to depression. You add that to people argue about rights, but the problem with the argument about rights, nobody here is against responsible gun ownership or the Second Amendment. But the thing about it is, when you have still the stigma around depression and mental illness, when you have a non-discussion about male rage, why, you know, like women are more likely to be killed by their boyfriends
And by strangers.
you know, and than by a stranger, you know, by their husbands and boyfriends. So all of these things combine, and we as a society are hypocritical about these things. We're hypocritical about sex. We're hypocritical about violence. we're hypocritical about, but we want this veneer of, everything's cool, or I'm a spiritual person, whatever people say. And this has been a problem, and the problem has been exacerbated because of the fact there's a business involved. The NRA is a front for the gun manufacturing business. And when you see like ads where people are really ramping up the hype about, well, you're going to need to defend yourself against protesters, I mean, it's ludicrous. And that kind of thing, when you see something like a Charlottesville go down, people who were claiming to be some kinds of militias walking around with automatic weapons, I mean, it's...
Just to speak to that, so I don't know if you heard recently, but Richard Spencer came to the University of Florida.
He got talked down, he got shouted down, didn't
He did.
Yeah.
I ended up watching that speech, crowd in a way that you could barely hear him over the booing, and enough protesters went.
Yeah.
But the fact that something like that could happen today, and the fact that that is a worry of everyday life, and, and seeing the social media aspect of it, where these people are saying the University of Florida is the next battleground. That's the language they're using now. And I think that just speaks to what you're saying. That's a product of this culture of just making sex taboo and making these things taboo, but still romanticizing guns and violence and
keeps the money flowing. Keeps it things. You could use that example for anything. Look at the Hollywood fallout. You can't say all of those things are happening and people don't know about it. It's impossible to say that people don't know about the behavior, what's going on in Hollywood or the music industry or the military industry or whatever.
Right.
It's all the same thing. It's who speaks up and when and how it affects the person who's speaking up versus the people who are running the show. That's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah. So,
Sorry, that's my fault.
No, it's totally fine.
And your good friend on top of that.
There's obviously a political through line through the work of Living Color. Do you think that that's sort of the artist's role to shed light on things?
I do want to mention something about the Richard Spencer thing.
Yeah.
So one of the debates now is about free speech, and this whole idea of curtailing speech by shutting things down. I have a mixed feeling about it. I abhor the kind of alt-right thing that Richard Spencer represents, but the antidote to speech is speech. The antidote, like you have if this person is going to get up and talk, then have a countervailing view. You know what I mean? Have somebody that's going to refute that conversation.
Right.
Shutting down the conversation drives it underground, makes this person a kind of aggrieved martyr. And when you have an aggrieved martyr, they turn to their followers and say, "See, they're the ones that don't want to. They're the ones that don't believe in American blah blah blah. They're the ones that
They're the racists.
They're the and they flip it 100% around. And really, what's happening is a kind of battle, like Orwell was very clear about this. That really the battle, and to a certain degree. It's a battle about language.
It's a rhetorical.
Right.
It's a battle about who seizes. When somebody says, well, nothing is true, what they're doing is they're trying to remove the basis of fact and remove the basis of, these documents, this is the history. When somebody says, well, nobody knows about blah, 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 when that's clearly not the case. Because there's an attempt to recast and remake the terms of the debate.
Like the whole idea of the Confederate monuments.
Oh.
That they are, this is history. Man, it's not really history. It's propaganda, which is there's a difference to that. There's like this is what is it? What's the expression? This is legacy, not hate.
Oh, legacy, not hate. Yeah. It's a legacy of hate.
It's a legacy of hate, exactly. It's like it's flipping that language around. And your question about the artist, sort of, what this means as an artist, it means that we have to see it for what it is. We have to be an arbiter of not particularly change, but of reflection. We have to reflect what we see. We have to reflect not only reflect what we see around us, but what we see in us, and what that stuff does to us. It does internally.
Right.
That a song like Blackout is really taking in that information and saying what it would do to me, what it would do to myself as the artist, and how I reflect that back to somebody.
It's one of the things that's very interesting is that there are different ideas about art and entertainment. One thing is that you don't ruffle, there's an idea that you don't ruffle the waters, you don't ruffle the waves. Don't say things. But if you want, and in not saying things, you can be universal. I don't think that's true. If you want to be universal, you have to be specific. You have to be more specific in order to be universal. Because when you tell the truth about your life as you live it, then other people can see through the subject matter into what's happening in their lives. So we've never shied away from talking about life. We've been called a political band, but we've had songs about romance and the situation between men and women, and we've had those songs. A song like Bye, a song like Love Is Ever Head, a song like Broken Hearts, a song like Lost Halo. Those songs have as much weight to us as This Little Pig, Go Away, Cult of Personality. In a song like Cult of Personality, so this is something we're all looking at. This is not something that's specific to us, but we're talking about something, but if we talk about Mussolini, you could be talking about Obama, you could be talking about Trump, you could be talking, because really, why is that person?
When you talk about Reagan.
When you talk about Reagan,
those songs written in about, to a degree, about the deification of Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and your own song is another example of the fact that that's still relevant today.
Right.
Sort of how we were talking about Who Shot You.
Right.
That's just speaks to the climate that we're living in now.
One of the things that's funny is that people are stumbling and trying to explain Donald Trump, and you I don't think you can understand Donald Trump unless you think about it in terms of really the cult of personality, but really cults like the dear leader, who is without flaw, and his base. They are, I'm not going to castigate them as anything other than the fact that he so represents for them he's their unmanned voice at the table. And he represents, even as he's making deals with banks, even as he's doing things, he hasn't recused himself from his many businesses. Even he's seen as somehow being a representative of the little guy. And those of us who are from New York,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's the part that was the most ridiculous coming up.
people from New York. I mean, this is the thing. Fred Trump, his father, really Donald Trump has a name is because of his father, Fred. And Fred Trump made concerted efforts, which he trained his son in discrimination against African Americans and Latino Americans in the housing
disenfranchised people. I have friends, and actually I have relatives that lived in Trump Village in Coney Island. One of the worst slums ever. And it was built so that he could put his bones on these things. It was tenements. He was a slumlord, basically. And he went as far out as he possibly could and built these slipshod as low budget housing as he could possibly build and make as much money as he possibly can, and then brought it into Manhattan.
One of the most remarkable facts of the whole Trump saga is that Woody Guthrie wrote protest songs about Fred. Trump.
I mean, he lived in Trump Village.
Really?
Woody Guthrie.
I didn't know that about Woody.
Oh yeah, because the thing is, part of the problem is that Woody Guthrie had African American musicians. He did music with African American musicians all the time, and he was getting stressed about having Negroes in his apartment, and he decided to write a song. So this whole thing has got roots going back, and this whole idea of Trump as a self-made guy,
It's not true.
And
most New Yorkers know it. Not to talk about to focus on him.
Yeah.
But he's really boisterous, really talking loud and saying nothing. And New Yorkers understood that 10 years ago, particularly when he put out a full-page ad against the Central Park Five.
Asking for the death penalty for them.
Right, which is insane. Like he was just trying to be a part of the conversation. That's all he wanted to do. He wanted to be a gadfly and be a part of the conversation. He didn't really want. He wasn't trying. And he was testing the waters then. Like if I can influence this, I can move on. I can move up. I can do whatever. But we all see that. This band sees it. The New Yorkers see it. You guys see it. We all see it.
So with someone like that in office, and with the state of the country's in now, what should be the goal of the artist, of the musician, and what's the goal of Shade, sort of in that same light?
Shade shows a reflection, I think, of the reaction to the things that Vernon Reid just mentioned. I mean, Shade is, in some sense, has the ingredients of the election in terms of how we see things.
We wrote that the summer before the election.
Yeah,
And that's one of the funniest things about this.
Interesting thing about the vibe. Is
Yeah.
really, it's go ahead.
Well, one of the things is like, Living Color, we're down here on the ground. And in that we live, middle class lives. You know what I mean? And we're affected by these policies. And really, Shade was written when Obama was president. And during the Obama presidency, we were told, it's post-racial, happy days are here again, or, whatever. And it was a great, it was a great moment. It was an important moment. His presidency, his re-election was. But a lot of things that people expected him to work miracles, and that was not going to be possible. And a lot of things that we're talking about on this record, are things that are constant. Whoever's in the White House. Lyndon Johnson was talking about the Great Society and, the war on poverty. And without the Vietnam War, he was one of our most progressive presidents. The Voting Rights Act was signed during his administration. But these things have been opposed. They've been fought against. And they've never been forgotten from the very time that they started. So at a certain point, they stripped the voting rights, provisions of the Voting Rights Act, because they've never let it go. Someone like Jeff Sessions, he wants to take the whole prison industrial private prison thing into the next level. And the thing is, one of the things that I personally have been gotten into is this whole thing of wrongful convictions. And the wrongful conviction thing is scandalous. And that's actually cuts across all racial lines.
Right.
These overzealous prosecutors, they like someone for a particular crime. And the facts be damned. And they take people and they take their lives for 10, 15, 20 years.
All the rest of their lives.
And if you extrapolate from that, so because we have DNA evidence, you have to, what the most chilling thing about it is that if you think back in history, all of our hands are bloody. Because, innocent people have been executed big time. When you think about the rate of, they're finding stuff now. When they didn't have DNA, people just stitched up, hemmed up, legally lynched for centuries. So that's something that's a very current issue that I think to speak to. And certain artists have done it in performing, making records in prison, performing, people from B.B. King to Johnny Cash.
Yeah, I was going to say this issue, unfortunately, like a lot of things we've been talking about, goes all the way back to the 60s and earlier, and with Folsom Prison Records. And, I think San Quentin was the other one.
Yep.
Advocating for prisoners' rights all the way back then.
Yep.
And that actually brings me to my next point. So including that issue, when you guys are sitting down to write a song or really construct an idea for a record, what draws you to certain issues? And does that process sort of come just as naturally as if you were to write a song about romance and these other topics?
Absolutely.
It has to work as music, or it's pointless.
Right.
Right. If it's not subject. It's not. I have to write a song about fill in the blank, and that's the worst music. That's where you get like really bad protest music, where the melodies don't work, and it's.
You want to talk about bad protest music and what that does real quick?
You know what I mean? Well, you take something like Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. Like, as you know, we do inner city blues.
Yeah, yeah.
But he did that because of his brother Frank had come back from Vietnam and was different after coming back from Vietnam. And that's what he had personal stake in saying something, because it was something that touched him. And that's why, and with the music of it, it's phenomenal musically. And it also says something. Like there's a LaBelle song from one of the later records. And Sonona Hendricks wrote the song, Who's Watching the Watcher? And that's, to me, a phenomenal song, because it takes the idea, well, you're watching, like this whole idea for security's sake, you're watching me, but who watches you? And then that has a resonance, because they found in the NSA that some of these guys that work at the NSA were stalking their girlfriends and their ex-wives. We're using the apparatus of the government. So then the whole idea that people will abuse power if they have it without checks and balances, that's like a thing. So if that feeling is an emotional feeling and something that we really take on, then the possibility of a song about surveillance may happen that actually works as a piece of music. But if it doesn't work as a piece of music, the subject could be righteous, the subject could be 100%, but if it doesn't work as a piece of music, then it's dead in the water.
Right. So I don't want to take too much more of you guys' time, but I do want to ask, so for the listener, for the person who may be, a journalist or just a local artist or like sort of these positions, what do you say to them? What can they do to help, shed light on some of these issues that we've been talking about today?
For me, it's just, I would say, you got to keep it real. I saw this interesting science television show. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Has a really great show on National Geographic, and he did an episode, which you probably can find on YouTube, with journalism. And I thought it was interesting how he was interviewed. He was talking about journalists, and he was talking about truth, and him being a scientist, and they were comparing the two things, which was interesting because he said, in my field, if I go into the lab and I discover something, I have to write a theory for it, and then there's a result. In order for anyone to pay attention to it, 40 other scientists have to go in and get the same or similar result. In order for it to become a fact, 1,000 scientists have to come in and get the same. Until then, and he was just talking about how journalism is kind of like a joke, and he had some journalists on the panel saying, well, all you have to do now is just post it.
Yeah.
So, you're asking the question. There's a responsibility, I think, with artists and young writers, and that is about what they're saying and being informed and being honest about it. And I think that's kind of really where it begins. It's not just like a propaganda scenario or getting information out there. And also, like musicians, what do they care about? Are they writing about something they don't really care about? Is it just a gig? We're making music and writing lyrics about things that we care about, that influence us. That makes it easier. It makes it more difficult for people maybe to get it, or for us to try to nail the concept of it. But it's coming from our experience of actually living in swimming in those experiences of who's that and the rest of the songs I don't want to shade for that matter. Invisible and those kind of things. We live in those experiences as we did with Cult of Personality and Love is Something We Had. It's not only a political thing. It's romantic, as Vernon said. It is things that ambivalence. It's the vibe about judging people or about living up to something that you're not. All of those kinds of things. But if you were really in that experience and you're young and you're writing, you're an artist, then you should deal with those things that are closest to you first. It's easier to relate to, but it's harder to put across. I always say begin there. Begin with the things that are closest to you, that affect you the most, or that you're experiencing, or that are challenging you, or that you're having difficulty with. Start there, and then work your way out.
I would like to address the same thing for Corey to address this too.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a real sea change around the idea of identity itself. Okay, there's two things. Number one, I'd like to hear people tell less narcissistic stories about themselves. Tell stories about other, even if they're invented characters or whatever. Tell, like Bad Leroy Brown or
Me and Bob McGee.
Me and Bobby McGee, or like Harry Hippie, like all these tunes. Yeah, I'd like to hear a return to tales, as well as self-reflection. The other thing, and I'll pass this on to Corey. This whole idea around identity, I would love to hear a song from the standpoint of the catfisher, not the person that's been catfished. Like, what drew this? What made this person do the thing that they did in terms of pretending to be another person, in their mind, a more desirable person?
Right.
What is the addiction to attention? The addiction to love at a distance? Like that, there's a phenomenal song to be written about that.
And to add to that, how do you think the advent of social media affects those topics when you're talking about narcissism and in general in media and songwriting?
We live in a very schizophrenic world where who you are online and who you are sometimes two very different things. And that's a very interesting subject to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go into that for days, but to think
Concept album.
it is. So one side is the online person, the other side is is day to day. But there's something to be said about the mental fitness and the mental acuity of the society that we live in right now, and we don't really address that. The things that Vernon was talking about the catfisher speaks to somebody who sounds like somebody who has Baron Munchausen by proxy or something like that. Any of those kind of ideas would make very interesting things to talk about, but I think there's a societal sort of idea that we have not really touched on, that the world's kind of fucking crazy, and in subtle and profound ways. I mean, you can go from soup to nuts as far as what's going on in terms of people's where people's mindset is, and to deal with that. Wow, that take a lot. That's a huge undertaking. It took us 5 years to make a record. So
It's going to come from people that live it. Download speeds, all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
We're raising children that know nothing else. We're raising children that
Instant
access.
all they know is Facebook. By the time they were conscious to reflect on being I and blah blah blah, they Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. This is the water they swim in, and this generation, and slightly older than our children, like the generation that this is what they know. This whole idea of connecting social identity, activism, there's going to be another thing. I'm hoping, and I believe this because every generation creates several people who are the voices of their generation. There's no single voice of a generation, but every generation produces those people. I want to see that in all. I want to see that in every form of rock. I want to see it in jazz. I want to hear it in R&B. I want to hear it in hip hop. Where literally, like, all of this podcasting, social media, that's the actual grist that they turn into art.
Right.
I find that fascinating. That podcasting has become what it has become based on the fact that it's sort of it's micro niche to a certain degree. That we have taken certain ideas and say, I want to talk about, I don't know, whatever. Pick thickness,
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And there's a niche. That's the thing. It's not even just a particular subject, but you can dig down. Like, how many, I remember in the early days of podcasting, there were all the Mac versus PC podcasts. There was a ton of them. You know what I mean? And I still listen to Mac OS Ken. You know, he does this 11-minute, like 11 to 14-minute podcast, and all he does is Apple and Apple News. And you know, it's one of my favorite shows, but it's a very specific thing. He works very hard. He does it pretty much daily. And you know, or the Pseudopod, you know, podcast, which is about horror. It's like short stories. I'm a horror fan, I'm a sci-fi fan, the various comic book things, the various social things. One of the greatest things on this tour is that we had Rod and Karen from the Black Guy Who Tips podcast. They actually came to a show, and Corey had been a guest, and they were like, for us, it was like celebrities. I mean, because we listened, are fans.
Yeah.
You know, I went to a broadcast of Oh Yeah Dude, and Jonathan Larroquette and Seth Romatelli's comedy podcast, and they did a live broadcast in Brooklyn, and I'm a huge fan, and they've name checked it several times. So it's a separate, interesting media world, and really the democratization. People talk about the democratization of media. The fact that people are doing live, like the Reid, they do a live performance of their thing. Mark Maron has done many, you know, just like live shows.
Yeah.
So there's a whole other thing that's happening now. For all the things that are challenging, they're very interesting avenues. And people say, hey man, what do I do to do this? I say, man, I don't know, man. Maybe you want to start a podcast or whatever, because it's actually a thing.
Yeah, and I mean, nowadays, some of the positives of those new technologies is that it makes it so much easier for an artist or a journalist or someone to get their voice out there. You know,
Chance the Rapper put his record out on SoundCloud. That's how he got on. And he's become a voice of this generation's hip hop.
Absolutely, he's exactly that.
We're seeing independent artists play late night shows, and these are people with a voice, these are people with, you know, social concerns that made their own records, and you can just put it up on a streaming service now. What do you think are some of the drawbacks of that, though?
Well, the drawbacks is you can't get paid, but you know, one of the things that's fascinating though is that vinyl it remains a thing, because we're in. Here's the thing about what's so crazy about the time that we're in. We're also in a kind of maker space time where people are physically. We're in a 3D printing space, and we're in a maker space, and we're in a kind of a steampunkish. Like, to me, turntable. The retention of the turntable is literally like a steampunk artifact.
Yeah.
It's a mechanical device, because people, you know what? With all this, you have 10,000 songs on your thing, whatever, on your phone. But interestingly enough, people like the artwork. People like the physicality. People like the ritual. The ritual of getting together with friends and playing 45s. This is something that is an actual thing that's happening in dorm rooms, it's happening in rec rooms, it's happening. It's a transgenerational thing. Like, I sat with my daughter, who's 14, and played a Stevie Wonder record, and she goes, "Wow," you know. So it's like it's an actual thing. And now the pressing plants are, they're full to capacity. You have to wait. But the whole idea of like putting out, if you want to put something out on SoundCloud and then turn around and turn it into a vinyl, have original artwork, you can actually turn that into a thing, and then maybe you sell 1,000 copies of it, but you keep everything. So there are like the potential of cottage industry right now. That's going to happen with comedy. Some goofy person who's out of their mind is going to spew their insane thoughts, and one of these people is.
It's happened more than once. Shit My Father Says turned into a really bad sitcom.
Because really bad TV show.
Yeah, my crazy ex-girlfriend. She was a YouTube star. There's a bunch of folks that have turned whatever it was that they did, that whatever machinations in their own head that they put on video or audio or whatever they did, is borne fruit in some ways.
Yeah, like Lily Singh. Like, I know who Lily Singh is because my daughter is a huge fan of Superwoman, and it's a hilarious thing. You know, it's this woman of Indian descent, Asian woman of Indian descent,
playing all these characters,
and plays her own parents. And she does this whole thing where she puts on the fake mustache and acts like her father, and puts on the sari and acts like her disapproving mom.
right?
And it's great. Ryan Hinga, you know, is the Asian guy who does really funny videos, but the thing is, they do the production, they do the work. So,
Right.
so yeah, you know, so I think there's something to be said, and from this will be my last thing. There's something to be said for taking activism, whatever you're concerned about, and making it entertaining, making it funny, making it poignant, making it scary, making it whatever it is that gets. See, the righteousness is not it. The you being right is nothing. It really doesn't matter. But that same thing embodied in a narrative, embodied in you know, put in animation, photography, all the different arts, dancing, whatever. If there's a thing, and whether you do it yourself or do it in combination with another artist in collaboration, because collaboration is very important.
It's key.
I think the aspect of being entertaining, entertainment is subversive. That's the thing. It's subversive to be entertaining.
Yeah.
Somebody has fallen in love with you before they realize they have, before they can take it back. And that's how we're going to affect each other. That's how we're gonna get it done. And when you have somebody that is dealing with mental illness, and they have the courage to even do a thing, because people are like, everything's medicalized, and you know, and the political record, and so I can't say anything about it. But the person that's brave enough to say, you know what, I have an issue, and they say something that's human about this thing. Next thing you know, people are relating to them.
And I think you're right, that should be the goal, to make something entertaining. Something earlier we were talking about what makes something universal, and particularly what makes music universal. You were saying, you know, a lot of people sort of go for the safe or the not social or not political to be universal, to be appealing, but it's taking that thing that you struggle with, or that you know someone else struggles with, and making it entertaining, because entertainment is universal.
It's the thing. If you want to talk about sexism, you have to be able to do it in such a way that when people see it, or even a douche can look at what you've done, and go, oh, maybe the douchebag will turn around and go, oh, and actually reflect. That's super effective. So what happens on our side? People, we're super serious, and we want to be taken seriously. I get it. But the thing about, Malcolm X had a fantastic sense of humor. Like, he was very, very fun. As well as he was outraged, he was also could be super funny. And that's the, when you listen to Jon Stewart, he's mad AF. But he's hilarious.
Yeah.
And that is the engine. The rage is the engine of the hilarity. Richard Pryor, when he was saying those things,
George Carlin
especially.
You know, and so those things, I mean, to say, it's important to realize all of the weapons, charm, outrage, poetry, all of it has to be on the table. And to say, well, we're not going to do that because it's whatever, that's not going to work. Because basically, if you look at Donald Trump, as ham-handed and ham-fisted, he has a certain appeal, a certain charm, a certain boisterousness, a certain enthusiasm. All of them.
That's entertaining.
And he's existed really as a businessman. He's an entertainer. You don't see Jeff Bezos. I mean, he's got a funny laugh, but you don't see Jeff Bezos doing the things. You know what I mean? Like, you don't see Michael Bloomberg, you know what I mean, doing. He leveraged the whole thing with the WWE, the whole thing with The Apprentice. All of that stuff was a Donald Trump delivery. His megalomania was delivered onto the American people. And people had already been in love with this dude. That dude, part of his appeal is he makes us mad. And for the people on the other side, who we've too often castigated Because a lot of people that voted, they just wanted to see the apple cart turned over. I get it, right? I tell you what, shocked me the first time I heard someone say, "Oh, I voted for Obama twice, and I voted for Trump." I was blind. I was not expecting to hear that.
There's
it's
people out.
Oh yeah.
I haven't met one of those.
No, oh no. I've heard it. And I've heard it more than 5 times. I've heard people say, "Oh, I voted for Obama twice." So what people are saying, deplorable this and deplorable that, and they're tossing his followers into the lake of fire. It's like people are more complicated. All of this is more complicated than we like to admit. Race, sexism, blah blah blah, homophobia, all of it is more complicated than we care to admit. And often families have got all of it going on. All of it going on. So that's something to when these works of art and things, when we objectify the other person and call them out their name, we're missing so many subtleties. We're missing so much.
Right.
We're dealing with other human beings. We're dealing with humans, we don't agree with them, but to demonize them, that's not it.
So it's not a political problem. It's not a social problem so much. It's a human problem.
It's all those things,
people.
all those other things, it's people doing it.
Right.
It's people doing it. The cop that's doing the wrong thing, as enraged as I am by that person doing that terrible thing, that person came from a family. That person came from to me, we have, it's funny. We have people that are family to us that are police officers. It's a dangerous, ugly, stupid, crazy job. And we know people that did the right thing.
Yeah.
So we have people that never drew their weapons. You know what I mean? They never, you know what I mean? That actually did their job with honor, boom, boom, boom. And also have got to deal with the fact of the PTSD and all that craziness that goes along with it. So when we're like anti, it's never forgotten.
And I think when you mentioned Jon Stewart earlier, I think he said you can love and respect a position like a police officer, but also hold it to a high standard.
The highest standard.
You have to.
Right.
You have to hold all of it to a higher standard. You have to hold yourself to a higher standard.
Yep.
And to say, you can go through any and all of this stuff, the kneeling at football games, to Black Lives Matter, to Antifa, to whomever, whatever that thing is, and say what this is about is holding everything to a standard higher than myself. You have to be above reproach, more so than I am, and I'm trying to be I'm trying to look for my highest self always, but you have to. We're looking for people to do who we have charged with our protection, with our moral authority, with any and all of this stuff, to be higher than that. I don't need the president to be my boy. I'm not trying to have a beer with him. I want him to be much more than that. Because he represents something much more than just Joe Sixpack. He's bigger than Joe Sixpack. He represents much more than Joe Sixpack. He represents a bunch more. And to know that there are people out there who feel like I don't have to do that says that you're not really. That's to me the failing of the society, and that to me sounds to me like some sort of mental illness. It's a mental blockage. It's a mental disease that I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this. It's I, me, my, and to be damned with anybody else around me. And if the slightest thing offends me, I'm going to jump up on my soapbox and talk about it, and over and over and over and over and over again, ad nauseum. And then you're dismissed as being just out of the frame. But these things have relevance. The so-called identity politics has a relevance.
100%.
And if you can't hold it up to in a particular way and say this is the best this is the best of who I am, this is the best of who I want the world to be, and feel like you're saying it in a way that makes sense, but still are dismissed, you understand the frustration, you understand where that cognitive dissonance comes from. I don't know what the question was, but here we are.
Things to unpack. We're not going to get it all in, but I really enjoyed the discussion. It's going to take people from all different walks and all different places to change what needs to be changed.
Right.
You know, it's going to take all of us, and a lot of us disagreeing with one another, coming from different spaces, to make, because seriously, the "Make America Great Again" thing is crazy. It's like to me, I hear MAGA and I think Japanese monster. You know what I mean? It's like no, I reject that in the sense that what again are you trying to get back to? There's no again. There's no again the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s? I don't think so.
Right.
You know,
The Great Depression, the Dust Bowl. You know, when are you talking
Well,
about?
the idea that the greatest state is behind us should
Right.
never be the mentality.
Exactly.
Of course,
That's
because
part
there's
of- that's
always
part of the
progress
problem.
to be made.
Well, that's one of the things. That's one of the talk about dog whistles. One of the dog whistles of authoritarianism, and I dare I say it, fascism, is the idea of the grand glorious past. And if
Yeah.
we could only eliminate these people, these factors,
We could go back.
We could go back. You know, the glory that was Rome, or whatever. And you know, America uber alles, you know, or whatever. And that's part of the whole alt-right scenario. It's kind of one thing that I've been harping on is whiteness is a fiction. Whiteness is a cover for ethnic diversity, ethnic differences. You know, when we talk about white people of European descent, what are we talking about? We're talking about German people, Italian people. We're talking about people from Spain. We're talking about people from the Scottish Island, you know, from the UK. And who's going to be in charge? That's what the whole thing about picking the Northern Europeans as the finest examples of what whiteness is, and so everyone else is aspiring to be like they're from Norway. It's insane. It's completely insane.
It's bizarre. I was listening to this podcast yesterday about Charlemagne. And how Charlemagne sort of like invented what Europe is to a large degree. That it was a Christian, blah 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 blah. But they had to deal with the Germanic tribes of the north, who they thought were savages, because or that even further in north into Norway and to Sweden, and who were all those other Germanic countries that were into Norse gods and into polytheism. So this is all bullshit.
Yeah, you know, and so all of this, so basically it's like constructs that are being foisted on as realities.
Right.
They're all constructs. All of it. I could turn around and say, you know, tribalism has been a great blight. And certainly it's been a problem in each African country. It's been a thing that who dominates in a particular thing. All of us with our differences can take those differences and weaponize them. And every people have done it. So how do we move past it? Part of the thing of democracy is having a common set of values. A common set of values that we can agree upon that really pulls us away. It's not that you leave who you are, but you in the public square, we're engaged in civil discourse. That's the thing, and that civil discourse is about how do we disagree respectfully.
Right.
Democracy is not just about winning. This whole thing about win. Democracy is how you lose. Democracy is losing and accepting the result.
Just settling onto a difference instead
And
of
moving,
weaponizing
that's
it.
you know what I mean, and taking those differences and weaponizing them, taking all this stuff. You know, the idea is to break what democracy is. Democracy is going through a stress test right now, big time. And it's really about citizens saying, you know what, this is more important. Like this thing that we're still working on. It's not right, it's not perfect. This thing this idea that you can wear a hijab and be an American and it's cool.
Right.
Like all these things, You can be a man in makeup, and you're an American, and it's cool, and you're a lot. You're part of this conversation. That's a challenge. You can be not religious and go into the public square with someone that is religious and have a conversation and walk away, not having convinced either, but that's what the public square is. The idea of taking the public square and turning it into some theocratic or some blah 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 or some genderized thing, and that's the problem.
Right.
That's the problem. We have to fight for that neutral, that space where everyone can come and talk. And whether we do agree or not, we can go back to your house and do whatever. But this thing of the commons and the public areas, right, where we can contest and debate, and if a Republican wins, they do. If a Democrat wins, they do. That's the thing. This whole insanity about failure is not an option, and we've always got to win, and we're gonna be number one. It's like we live on one planet. We live in one world. This is a real thing, and we'll take our lumps. We never came into this that we should be, because of what we went through. We need blah blah blah. We just wanted to do what we want to do. You know what I mean? As a band, we never had that conversation. I mean, that's the thing. We wanted to be. And us and our kin and our brethren, all our people that take rock as our birthright, as a thing, this is us. We just want to be in the marketplace like everybody else and stand or fall. Not get blocked, not get told this is not something that you're supposed to be doing.
This is not yours.
This is not yours. Of course it's ours. And it's yours because of course we're human beings. We influence each other. That's the whole point. Jazz is a combination of African rhythms, European harmonies, and American innovation. That's what jazz is.
That's what hip hop is.
That's what hip hop is. Hip hop is one of the most amazing. It's the last great movement. It's the last great art movement of the 20th century. I'm saying you include graffiti, hip hop, breakdancing. It's a complete arts movement. It's the last one of the 20th century. And this is from people who was like, this is nonsense, it's a novelty. It's that noise y'all doing in the community center. Well, those community centers was the beginning. Ultimately, it became a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Right, and I mean, your
It's
respect for
fashion,
these
too.
histories are clearly, evident in your music as well. I think you mentioned the song Blackout earlier.
Yeah.
That was probably my favorite one on the most recent record because it
Right.
goes through like two very different feels. There's
Right.
that heavy funk groove into the hard rock, and then it's clear where your influences come from in a very amazing way, I think.
It's like Electric Flag. Buddy and
Buddy Miles.
Sorry.
I know we're cool like that. We're just talking like boys. You know what I mean?
Buddy, I was like, buddy guy, buddy rich.
Right now, Buddy Miles. And all there's a trio, and the three of them sort of like took everything that they had and wherever they came from and made it into what it is. But that's like Vernon was saying earlier, is the whole idea of collaboration is key to this. And who knows if that's how it works, how it works in the real world, but for us it's how it works.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I just want to say this has been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Obviously,
for
you're great
doing this.
interviews and talking blah blah blah.
I
Really enjoyed the conversation though.
Yeah.
Say nothing and keep them talking.
Step in.
Thanks so much, guys.
You're taller than you look like sitting down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just got shitty posture, so.
Because he hasn't seen his daughter in like 18 years. She's here. He has a daughter.
So I didn't know that.
The lady took us to England.
saying it was a little stressed out.
While driving here to do this interview, by probably 5 or 6 different billboards that were all, advertisements for gun ranges and going and firing automatic weapons, and they were all strangely sexualized. I don't know if that's
Always
something
a
that
hot
you
girl
guys.
holding a gun.
Yes, it's always a woman holding some sort of assault rifle, and I don't know if that's something that have you seen a lot of that attitude in advertising in your time in Florida?
Well, sex and violence is American as apple pie. It's the thing about it is a weird combination of sex, violence, and religiosity. And I mean religiosity in terms of doctrinal, about spirituality. Like people have said, the most segregated day is Sunday. I mean, Christian beliefs did not stop any of the things that happened in slavery. And so those things, all those attitudes, we live, interestingly enough, as violent as these times are, we live in a much less violent time. And I could talk about having been a boy in the 70s and in the 80s, crazy. But at the same time, the proliferation of guns, and the proliferation of rage is it's a powder keg always. And you add that to depression. You add that to people argue about rights, but the problem with the argument about rights, nobody here is against responsible gun ownership or the Second Amendment. But the thing about it is, when you have still a stigma around depression and mental illness, when you have a non-discussion about male rage, why, like women are more likely to be killed by their boyfriends,
And by strangers.
than by a stranger, by their husbands and boyfriends. So all of these things combine, and we as a society are hypocritical about these things. We're hypocritical about sex. We're hypocritical about violence. We're hypocritical but we want this veneer of, everything's cool, or I'm a spiritual person, whatever people say. And this has been a problem, and the problem has been exacerbated because of the fact there's a business involved. The NRA is a front for the gun manufacturing business. And when you see ads where people are really ramping up the hype about, well, you're going to need to defend yourself against protesters, I mean, it's ludicrous. And that kind of thing, when you see something like a Charlottesville go down, people who were claiming to be some kinds of militias walking around with automatic weapons, I mean, it's...
Just to speak to that, so I don't know if you heard recently, but Richard Spencer came to the University of Florida.
He got talked down, he got shouted down, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
I ended up watching that speech. Crowd in a way that you could barely hear him over the booing, and enough protesters went.
Yeah.
But the fact that something like that could happen today, and the fact that that is a worry of everyday life, and, and seeing the social media aspect of it, where these people are saying the University of Florida is the next battleground. That's the language they're using now. And I think that just speaks to what you're saying. That's a product of this culture of just making sex taboo and making these things taboo, but still romanticizing guns and violence and
keeps the
culture.
money flowing. Keeps the money. Keeps the things. You could use that example for anything. Look at the Hollywood fallout. You can't say all of those things are happening and people don't know about it. It's impossible.
Yeah.
To say that people don't know about the behavior, what's going on in Hollywood or the music industry or the military industry or whatever.
Right.
It's all the same thing. It's who speaks up and when and how it affects the person who's speaking up versus the people who are running the show. That's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah. So,
Sorry, that's my fault.
No, it's totally fine.
And your good friend on top of that.
There's obviously a political through line through the work of Living Color. Do you think that that's sort of the artist's role to shed light on things?
I do want to mention something about the Richard Spencer thing.
Yeah.
So one of the debates now is about free speech, and this whole idea of curtailing speech by shutting things down. I have a mixed feeling about it. I abhor the kind of alt-right thing that Richard Spencer represents, but the antidote to speech is speech. The antidote, like you have if this person's going to get up and talk, then have a countervailing view. You know what I mean? Have somebody that's going to refute that conversation.
Right.
Shutting down the conversation drives it underground, makes this person a kind of aggrieved martyr. And when you have an aggrieved martyr, they turn to their followers and say, "See, they're the ones that don't want to. They're the ones that don't believe in American blah blah blah. They're the ones that
They're the racists.
They're the and they flip it 100% around. And really, what's happening is a kind of battle, like Orwell was very clear about this. That really the battle, and to a certain degree. It's a battle about language.
It's a rhetorical.
Right.
It's a battle about who seizes. When somebody says, "Well, nothing is true," what they're doing is they're trying to remove the basis of fact and remove the basis of these documents. This is the history. When somebody says, "Well, nobody knows about blah blah blah," when that's clearly not the case, because there's an attempt to recast and remake the terms of the debate.
Like the whole idea of the Confederate monuments.
Oh.
That they are this is history. It's not really history. It's propaganda, which is there's a difference to that. There's like this is what is it? What's the expression? This is legacy, not hate.
Oh, legacy, not hate. Yeah. It's a legacy of hate.
It's a legacy of hate, exactly. It's like it's flipping that language around. And your question about the artist, sort of, what this means as an artist, it means that we have to see it for what it is. We have to be an arbiter of not particularly change, but of reflection. We have to reflect what we see. We have to not only reflect what we see around us, but what we see in us and what that stuff does to us. It does internally.
Right.
That a song like Blackout is really taking in that information and saying what it would do to me, what it would do to myself as the artist, and how I reflect that back.